We're so accustomed to dirty windows, we're not interested in washed windows. If they'd only do one single thing, give us the certainty that we get to New York on time and get home on time, we'll settle nothing for asking. Is that asking for too much?
The commuter himself, his sole objective really is to maintain the present service that he has, see it improve somewhat. You take the rail, the rapid transit system, its sole objective is to make money. And if a rail line, a commuter's money, their sole objective is to discontinue or you start with a conflict, and who's going to resolve this conflict?
Under the free enterprise system, profit is not a dirty word, and profit is the only way that the free enterprise system finds methods of survival for business. So we feel an obligation to the public to render the service, but we feel...
Not all of railroading is profitable, but all of it is necessary for public convenience, and therefore, either through railroad management itself or through the aid and intervention and perhaps the ownership by the state, the railroad has to perform its entire service, not just part that it would like to perform at the maximum amount of profit.
Now, you might ask, why is the United States government interested in the private operation of a railroad? Well, they're interested for many, many reasons. First of all, we have kept, this is the only country in the world in which we haven't nationalized this form of transportation. And we want to keep it that way. We want to keep it private enterprise, and therefore we have a big stake in keeping the railroads operating.
If the government is worried about keeping the railroads running, so are the railroaders themselves. Only a short while ago, it would have been inconceivable to find the president of a railroad on a mock campaign train drumming up popular support. Yet here on this train, there are no less than 5 of them, trying to reach the public with a message about an industry in trouble.
Hurrah, hurrah for victory again. Hurrah, hurrah, our union to maintain. So we join the chorus and we shout the glad refrain, singing for Blaine and for Logan. His grandfather's hat is too big for his head, but Ben tries it on just the same. It fits him too quick, which has oft times been said with regard.
Why we appear before you today to ask for support is in order to prevent the nationalization of railroads. If Congress does not give railroads equality of competitive opportunity, nationalization of railroads, in my opinion, is inevitable. You know what the consequences of that will be. It will inject a massive dose of socialism into the national political economy and topple our American private enterprise system with it. That is one of the reasons, in addition to that, a much better railroad service, why we are justified in asking for and expecting your support.
Again and again, fill your glasses with Martin and Buren at you. We'll now please ourselves and our lasses, and we'll vote for old Timbuktu. So let us be up and do it, and to cling to our cause brave and true. I'll bet you what fortune will beat 'em, we're the hero of Timbuktu. We're the hero of Timbuktu, the hero of Timbuktu. I'll bet you a fortune will beat 'em, we're the hero of Timbuktu.
Possibly the rails have meant more to me personally than to most Americans. My father was a railroad man on the Northern Pacific. I was actually born in the depot at Cardwell, Montana, and spent most of my boyhood around the tracks. I didn't realize it then, but I was growing up in the twilight of the American passenger railroad. The great rail monopoly of passenger transportation was in the process of being destroyed forever. Most people, of course, are aware that there has been a radical change in the relationship between Americans and their railroads, but relatively few people are aware of the extent of this change or of the fundamental nature of its implications. Our story of the plight of the American passenger train begins in the yards of the New Haven Railroad at 6:30 in the morning.
Or station next straight.
Short move on the west track, all right. Short move on the west track.
West.
All right.
75. West 367 with the 2032 and the 2031 out on 3 at 655.
6:55 train to Grand Central, New York. Track 8. Stepping in Milford, Stratford, Bridgeport, Westport and Saugatuck, Norwalk and South Norwalk, 125th Street, Grand Central, New York.
The first American passenger proudly boarded a steam train in 1830. Since that time, there have been obvious changes, not the least of which is the change in what the railroad means to both those who ride it and to those who work it.
Norm, you know, at one time when you and I first hired out here, railroading was a family affair. We knew the big officials. They were men who had started here and grew up with the railroad, and they had a pride, and they had an understanding of our troubles and our conditions, and they knew railroading. But today, you've taken the past 15 years, you're only a stepchild, and so is the railroad. You've had 4 or 5 different administrations here. I don't know how much basic interest they have or thoughtfulness for the public or you or I or the operation of the railroad.
If the railroad appears to be not particularly interested in the public itself seems to be not particularly interested in the railroad, at least if we look at the figures. Fewer Americans ride the trains today than at any time since 1885. The typical railroad passenger today is the commuter. He represents 60% of all people who ride the trains, and as such represents the bulk of the passenger problem faced by the railroads. Passenger service in the main does not pay. Short-run peak loads followed by long idle periods, inefficient equipment, higher taxes than other forms of public transport, rising costs for labor and materials, all add to the passenger headache. That headache strikes the commuter with special force, and he reacts.
This is just, we're riding basically on the same kind of equipment that took Lincoln back to Springfield to be buried on.
Do you know that in 1902, a friend of mine was doing some research. In 1902, that's 6 years ago, a train got from Bridgeport to New York in 1 hour and 10 minutes. Today, with jet airplanes and the rest of it, the New Haven takes an hour and a half.
Same distance.
Same distance.
You don't know whether your train is going to be late in the morning, every morning.
Right.
Of course it isn't. It's on time some mornings, but you never know whether it's going to be on time or whether it's going to be late. Same thing in the evening. You don't know whether your 6:02 is going to pull out at 6:02 or whether it's going to pull out at 8:30.
Listen, we don't even know when it's on time anymore, frankly.
And you get a lot of byproducts of this that are very bad, because your wife is, let's say, meeting you at the station. She doesn't know. She can sit there in an hour, and unless she's very lucky, she'll never hear, is the train late? Why is it late? What happened? And there's a great deal of anxiety on the part of the women, and some, I suppose, on the part of the children.
It's the absolute uncertainty that drives everybody nuts. You know, during the war, the best way to keep the enemy tortured, if you will, was to say nothing and just leave them not know what's going on instead of giving them the certainty that the guy's been shot down or a guy been killed or not been killed. I mean, this is more torture than anything else. And this, without exaggerating too much, our families never know. They don't have a telephone.
Well, they don't really. They don't know when there's an accident.
Exactly.
They don't know when there's a fire in the tunnel.
Right. That's right.
Nobody tells them anything. It's the anxiety on the other end of it. And I don't know what these people do with small children. What do the women do when they hear the train is delayed for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours as it was the other night?
Well,
what
I've
do
got
they
some
do?
small children, and I'll tell you frankly what they do. They just given up expecting to eat with their daddies, and frankly, the kids really show it when I get home. As a result of which, they don't get home till 9 or 10. They're a mess the next morning, and this goes on 5 days a week. This is exactly what happens.
Time after time, when we're stalled on the track, such as we've been 2 or 3 times within the past 2 or 3 weeks, and left there sitting for an hour or 2 hours or more, it almost seems as though the crews go out of their way to keep us from receiving any information as to the cause of the delay at all. They actually go and hide in the closets, it seems like.
The problem is that even right now in talking about it, we're assuming the fact that breakdowns are normal, that fires are normal, that uncertainty is normal. Why should we even accept the fact? Why should we accept the fact that breakdowns are a normal part of running a railroad? I mean, we've gotten so used to this horrible delay that we're beginning to talk, well, when we get delays, let's just hear about it.
New Haven has me conditioned to the point where I would accept a warm car in the winter, a cool one in the summer, and a bench if it would run on time.
On time, that's the point.
That's all I want. I want something that will get me to and from work on time, and I'll stand, literally, or I'll sit on the floor.
Right.
That's the kind of thing they want.
I don't know if you realize it.
That raises a very key question. If this is so difficult and if life is so difficult, why don't you live in town?
Well, I'd say in our case it's merely the lesser of two evils. We have to put up with the physical discomfort. Leastways, we feel it's important to our children, and that's why we're living out here.
Children. The education of children, the climate in which they live, and the community in which they live. And we like the town very much, all of us.
But you've got to do it. I remember one day last summer, we were stalled for change, no air conditioning, the sun was baking us, we had a hermetically sealed car, and we were all absolutely sweltering. And we stalled someplace out in the open sunshine for about an hour and a half, and one of the boys on the train, I'll never forget, he said, we're all perspiring and just dying there, baking like sardines or something. He says, but it's so good for the children.
What about the railroad itself? What sense do you get out of the railroads coping with this community, giving you any sense that there's anything happening?
I might address myself to that. It's a very frustrating and discouraging picture. Of course, there are evidences of the morale of the railroad, which, shall we say, seep down to the commuter. Because so many times recently I've had the feeling that the commuter was the person who was left right smack at the bottom of the barrel, and I can explain that. We're considered last in order of importance.
I frankly feel there's a moral deterioration at the top that is reflected in the devil take the hindmost towards the commuter. They don't realize or refuse to realize that outside of their stock values and bond values or whatever values they call it down there, the lifeline to our livelihood and the lifeline with connection between New York and our children is just something that's unimportant. This is basically the problem. It's a moral disintegration of the people at the top.
They say they're broke.
Convinced.
They're broke. This line is now broke.
There's no question of what they're broke.
They're broke.
Let X them up or I get out.
If the passenger is unhappy with the railroad has its own problems. It is fighting for survival. Road employees in Boston, Massachusetts, demonstrating in support of the management of their railroad in an appeal to the state legislature for tax relief. Tax relief and possibly subsidy is the New Haven's only hope, for unlike most other railroads, its profits from hauling freight no longer cover its losses in hauling people.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is George Alpert. I am president of the New Haven Railroad, and I appear here in favor of this bill for tax relief. The New Haven Railroad, which has served this area for over a century and a quarter, is in very serious trouble. The patient is sick, and there are a number of doctors around who don't seem to know what the ailment is, or certainly don't demonstrate any appreciation of it, but are quick to prescribe cures. The plight of the railroads in America has been the subject of many studies. Studies by congressional committees, by the Interstate Commerce Commission, by the Department of Commerce, on various occasions. And the point of all these studies has been that there have been great changes in the railroad business in the last quarter of a century or so. The railroads are no longer monopolies. Much of our freight business has gone to the highway. Much of our passenger business has gone to the highway and to the air. Passenger operation, whatever form of transportation you may use, whether it's rail, whether it's rapid transit, whether it's airlines, is a deficit operation. Because of this passenger deficit, ever since I've been president of the railroad, we've been working against a deadline. There hasn't been a day when we could rest comfortably that we were going to survive until the next week. I have campaigned now for over 5 years. I've been president since January of 1956, and I have campaigned all during that time for equal treatment on every level of government with other forms of transportation. I ask for no gift. I ask for no giveaway. I ask for no favor. I ask for no special privilege. All I ask for is equality. All the railroads need, all we ask is equal treatment with other forms of transportation. We're entitled to no more. And I can say to you very frankly that we expect no less. If the railroads have outlived their usefulness, if we go to go the way of the covered wagon, well, let's call it a day. Let's relegate the railroads to the Smithsonian Institution and have less talk about the necessity for service.
There was a time when no one questioned the need for railroads. The period from 1830 on was a time for building. Wherever the railroad went, there went the flow of American expansion. The great trains ran everywhere. By the turn of the century, there was hardly a community in America more than 20 miles from a railroad station. The stations themselves were more than just stopping places for trains. They brought the world to our doorsteps in the persons of elegant gentry dismounting from the spittoon splendor of the parlor cars. And if a railroad station was an entrance, it was also a gateway. The trains almost demanded that we use them to move out over the old boundaries. And as we did so, a collection of small provinces became joined into a great nation. In many ways, the steam locomotive and its train of cars are a more accurate symbol for the growth and development of America than the covered wagon. For most of the 19th and well into the 20th century, there was a romantic attachment between America and the railroads. There was no love lost on the big corporations that owned, manipulated, and exploited them, that cast the railroads into roles of inconstant and overbearing suitors. The love affair was between people and trains. Thomas Wolfe captured it when he wrote, "Brother, have you heard the thunder of the fast express? The names of the mighty rails that bind the nation, the wheeled thunder of the names that net the continent. The Pennsylvania, the Union Pacific, the Santa Fe, the Baltimore and Ohio, the Chicago and Northwestern, the Southern, the Louisiana and Northern, the Seaboard, the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul, the Lackawanna, the New York, New Haven, and Hartford, the Florida East Coast, the Rock Island, and the Denver and Rio Grande. Brother, the names of the engines, the engineers, and the sleeping cars. The great engines of the Pacific type, the articulated Malleys with 3 sets of 8 yoked driving wheels, the 400-ton Thunderbolts with J.T. Klein, T.J. McRae, and the Demon Hawkeyes of H.D. Campbell on the rails. Trains cross the continent in a swirl of dust and thunder. The leaves fly down the tracks behind them. The great trains cleave through gulch and gully. They rumble with spoked thunder on the bridges over the brown wash of mighty rivers. They toil through hills. They skirt the rough brown stubble of shorn fields. They whip past empty stations in the little towns, and their great stride pounds its even pulse across America. Today, the great days are over. This is one of the famous trains of the American past on its last run, the Nellie Bly. The Nellie went into service in 1887 as a fast express between New York and Atlantic City. In her prime, the Nellie Bly often hauled over 500 vacationers in 17 coaches and 2 diners. But in her last days, her 2 remaining coaches averaged but 12 people. The Nellie Bly is one of more than 5,000 trains that have vanished forever from the American landscape. Gone, probably forever, are the Hustler, the Royal Blue, the Honeymoon Express, the Gulf Coast Rebel, the State of Maine, and dozens like them. There are no passenger trains at all anymore on the Lehigh Valley, the Maine Central, the Tennessee Central, the St. Louis Southwestern, the Norfolk Southern, the Western Maryland, and many others. The little branch lines have almost completely dried up, and so have some of the main lines. You cannot ride the railroad to Bangor, Maine, to Bennington or Manchester, Vermont, to Ithaca, New York, Annapolis, Maryland, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, or to hundreds of communities like them. Passenger service has even dried up in whole states, most notably Maine, which has no trains at all between its cities. South Dakota is in a similar position, and so are portions of other states. Indeed, the great days are over. Passenger railroads are disappearing. Of that, but the question might legitimately be asked, who needs them? To get the answer, we are going to several places around the country where the impact of this question, with a trip from New York to Chicago. 30 years ago, traveling to Chicago on the Broadway Limited from Pennsylvania Station, or on the 20th Century from Grand Central, was an experience in luxury. Leaving at 6 p.m. and arriving at 9 the next morning. These were the most famous and glamorous trains in the world. Today, the trains still run from New York to Chicago. The red carpet is gone for passengers coming aboard the 20th Century Limited. It is still considered a good train, and some of the old niceties are still observed. But for many of the people to whom the ride was once a thrill, the feeling is no longer the same, nor is the reason for being there.
I'm on this train because the weather canceled me out of an airplane ride quicker to Chicago so I could be rested for tomorrow. I travel all over the country and find that airplanes, in spite of weather, get me there faster and more comfortably.
In other words, for
You two men, this is emergency travel.
That's
It's
right.
emergency travel for me.
Now, normally I wouldn't be aboard this thing. I would much prefer being on a plane because you could be there in 2 hours and get a good night's rest at the hotel, whereas aboard the train, I know I won't sleep all night. I just can't sleep on a sleeper. That's all there is to it.
The decline of the passenger train was inevitable. The jet is faster and more glamorous, the automobile more convenient. But there are many who feel the railroad industry itself, labor as well as management, contributed to that decline.
Oh, I think the service in the train is good. The service that I find inconvenient is the way you have to get your tickets. When we anticipated taking this trip, we went to our agent, travel agent in New Rochelle, and said we want to go on the 20th Century to Chicago on Sunday night. And he said, oh, we can't send you tickets for that. You have to go directly to the railroad. Well, we phoned the railroad, and I must say the gentleman was very accommodating on the other end. But it meant we had to make a trip into New York a day prior to our taking off. So that turned out to be a great inconvenience.
Well, I don't want to be critical of the railroad, but I called the station a number of times to just try to get a reservation, and I thought maybe they had gone out of business because it was so long before we got an answer, and finally someone, it really was an inconvenience. Now, you don't get that kind of a setup with the airplanes because they're really alert, alive, and active, and looking for business. The railroads seem to be somewhat indifferent as to whether people are going to patronize them or not. I think there has to be a resurgence in spirit and service and in many other directions. That's one of the reasons I believe that the railroads really have been hurt.
Professor Stanley Burge of Northwestern University, a specialist in transportation.
I look at management of different kinds of transportation. My job is to teach business administration as it applies to the transportation industry. It does rather surprise me to see the contrast in the managerial techniques employed by railroads, airlines, motor carriers, and so forth. I do think that if I could make one constructive suggestion to the railroad industry, it would be that they use more long-term planning than they do now. I think that some railroads have long-term planning and research actually going on full-time. Other railroads are sort of leading, are sort of in the dark from day to day. They are planning for next week, but not for 10 years from now. What I would like to see on every railroad is a vice president in charge of 1980.
George Cahill, a railroad labor union official.
If certain heads of the railroads would realize that they're now in a competitive form of industry, and they have to go out and compete with other forms of transportation like they haven't in the years gone by, I think that this would be a much better place to work. Such as we have them, every so often they become economy-minded, so the first thing they do is take off a train. When you take off a train, you lose business. Some of the reasons for this diminishing passenger service and freight business is because certain financiers have come into this industry and have tried to milk it instead of trying to improve the business.
Lewis Mumford, a noted pioneer in urban and regional planning.
First of all, the railroad has been unprogressive in its technological development. They introduced the streamlined train in the 1930s, but the streamlined locomotive and train had already been invented in 1865, and it took them all that time to realize that there was a technological advantage in streamlining. And so they have been very slow, and the unions, too, have been slow in adapting themselves to the new conditions. They need a more flexible service. They shouldn't have to run a 10-car train when they only need a 3-car train. They should, if they have a more flexible service and fewer passengers, run more trains with less cars instead of fewer trains with more cars. There are 100 ways in which they have gone to sleep on that job. And they needed a jolt to wake them up. Unfortunately, this jolt has been so severe, it looks as though it might kill them.
Senator Warren G. Magnuson, chairman of the powerful Senate Commerce Committee.
It's been said that railroad management is bad. Now, just where you point your finger to what president or what road is a difficult thing. It would be like me going by a unpainted house or run-down house, and I might suggest the management's bad inside. But I don't know whether the wife didn't want to spend the money for the paint, or the husband could have been out of a job and didn't have the money to paint. Now, this is the problem that you run into. The railroads can do a lot, though, I think, in saying to themselves and making a decision that they are going to, that passenger traffic, passenger trains are still a part of a railroad system, still necessary in the United States, and not continue with the philosophy that passenger traffic is something we want to get rid of, because freight is the big bulk of their revenue. In other words, just cast it aside, and once they make up their collective minds to that, they're going to do something about it themselves, and the government's going to aid them.
One railroad that seems to have made up its collective mind to do something about passenger service is the Chicago and Northwestern. It is providing the passengers on its 3 Chicago commuter lines with some 200 new trains of an advanced design, which are both more efficient and more comfortable than the equipment they replaced.
The way it used to be, we were late in the morning, usually a half an hour. In the evening, we were much later, often 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes. Now we not only are on time, but we are usually 2 minutes ahead of time in Chicago every morning. Of course, another thing that impresses me is the clean cars. Now I can even wear a white coat to work.
And we don't get wet when it rains either.
Oh, you
The windows used to stick. We couldn't get them open, and then we couldn't get them closed, and if whatever it was doing outside, it did inside, too.
The windows would rattle. Birds would practically fly through the train when it stopped at a station.
The roof leaks.
As a matter of fact, it was very unpleasant.
And occasionally a rock.
Art here has been riding for 39 years, so he probably has a little background I have.
I started at Irving Park at 39 years ago, and then we moved to Park Ridge, and I rode from Park Ridge and then to Barrington. And I've seen a conversion of, from the wooden coaches to the steel coach, and then to those with the dome roofs. Can't compare with this new coach that they now have with the good lighting and good air.
As far as the service is concerned, you have a train running every hour both ways on the Wisconsin division that I know of. And I believe, for one, my wife has taken the train in the last several weeks, over and above comparison some time ago, and she used to drive in all the time just for the convenience of it. It's true that there are local stops all up and down the line, up until about 4:30 in the afternoon when the expresses start running out for long-distance commuters. But for the most part, I think you'll find a lot of the gals, especially during the wintertime and inclement weather, are starting to take the train into town, do a little shopping, instead of getting in a car and driving over to various shopping centers and things like that.
Gosh, they take the train in the morning, or even drive in. I mean, where are you going to park? Parking in the loop in Chicago.
It's at a premium, and it's very expensive.
Very expensive, and it's terrific to get in. You drive all over trying to find a place, even in the city parking lot, even in the city lots.
Despite the highway beside its tracks, the Chicago and Northwestern's commuter traffic continues to increase, a source of some satisfaction to its chairman, Ben W. Heineman.
In 1956, when new management came to this railroad, we had a fairly typical commuter problem. We had steam engines, we had dirty and old coaches, and our suburban schedules were not completely reliable. We concluded that we were going to have to put this service on a basis that would enable it to compete with new expressways which were then being planned or constructed. We also needed the assistance of regulatory commissions in giving management freedom or relative freedom to undertake these necessary changes. We obtained this from our regulatory commission here in Illinois, and on the basis of that, we went ahead. We purchased some $43 million worth of new equipment. We modernized it completely with air-conditioned, modern cars, push-pull equipment of a new design. And today we believe that we have some 40,000 satisfied commuters each day, each way, that we have made a contribution to the community. And in addition, we have converted losses of some $2 to $2.5 million a year from our suburban operations to to a very small profit.
Today, in sharp distinction to the rest of the nation's railroads, the Chicago and Northwestern carries more passengers into the city than at any time in its 113-year history. To the multitudes in other large cities who fight their way in and out every day in increasing numbers, the experience of the Chicago and Northwestern suggests at least a partial answer to what has become a major transportation problem. Among those who have been concerned with this problem is Harrison Williams, United States Senator from New Jersey.
Certainly, it is true that we face a desperate crisis in transportation in our country today. Right now, 2/3 of the people in this country are living in metropolitan areas. It soon will be 75% of our people are living in metropolitan areas. Twice a day in these metropolitan areas, everybody's going the same place. They're going from their home to work in the morning and then from work to home in the evening. And we know that because we have not met the problem of moving these people efficiently, effectively, we have got ourselves in a state of paralysis. Out of traffic jams alone in this country today, we lose from $5 to $6 billion a year. We used to move people rather effectively on rails all over the country. Out in Los Angeles, they used to have the interurban. New York, New Jersey, we used to have efficient mass transit on commuter railroads. But throughout the country, we see a deterioration has set in ever since World War II. And rail lines have been abandoned, or service has been discontinued, or has been set back. And we have, as a nation, tried to meet our metropolitan transit rush peak hours through the automobile and on the highways.
This is Los Angeles, California, the city which more than any other has come to rely on the automobile and the highway. Governor Edmund Brown.
Well, here in Los Angeles, you see all these automobiles, one right after another, bumper to bumper, and we're trying to do the best we can. We have the best freeway system in the entire United States, but it just isn't enough. We're going to have 5 million more people, and then think what the situation will be here with 5 million more automobiles, and we have one automobile for almost every person in the state. Think what the situation will be when that happens. We have a budget here in this state of $2.6 billion. A third of it goes into freeways, city and county roads, just to take care of these people. And we have other great needs. 80% of them have one person in the car, maybe 90%. It means congestion, bumper-to-bumper traffic, slowness, getting to work, delays, vexations, having to leave an hour and in some cases an hour and a half from their homes to get where they want to go. It just means locked up in a car, an hour in the morning, an hour at night. It means accidents, highways, congestions in the courts due to traffic accidents. It's just not good living in this modern day. You understand, too, when you build a freeway, an 8-lane freeway, you have to take all sorts of land off the way. And these are off the tax rolls, which increases the taxes on the houses that are left. All of these automobiles have to park someplace. They're put into parking lots that don't produce as much money in taxes as a fine building or a department store. All of this has a counter effect on the financing of a city or county. It has an effect upon the taxes that each individual pays. It has a destructive effect in every way, and we must do something about it. We have to have a system of interlocking mass rail transportation moving in the areas where people want to go. They will still have to use their automobiles. But if we have fast, comfortable, and expeditious mass rail transportation, speedy, getting them there quickly, then we'll begin to make some progress in this area, and people will begin to live again. It actually means freedom of the individual, freedom to do some of the things that a free citizen wants to do with his life. He doesn't want to be caged in an automobile 2 hours of every day of his life. He might just as well be in jail as be moving on a 2 hours every day of his life.
Ironically, Los Angeles once had a flourishing system of rail transportation. The 900 red cars of the Pacific Electric Railway running over 1,100 miles of track that made up the most complete network of interurban electric railway service in the country. But one by one, as highways grew, the rail lines vanished. Only a few weeks ago, the red car line running from Long Beach to Los Angeles was closed down. It was the first line in the system and the last to go. And this is its final run.
I sure hate that they're discontinuing these red cars here. The people wanted rapid transit and they had it. And now it's sure a shame that they're going off.
All of it's got to go for progress, but I think that's a mistake because the buses got to run on the freeway and the roads, and the cars here have their right-of-way right on through to the beach. They don't have to tie up the traffic at all.
I'm an engineer, and I've made an extensive study of rapid transit systems. And the biggest mistake was when they first abandoned the Glendale-Burbank line and let these rights-of-way revert. Now it's going to be terrifically expensive to ever get adequate rights-of-way for an efficient transportation system.
It almost sends a chill up my spine to sit here and think that this is the end and there will be no more in the future.
At his home in Amenia, New York, Louis Mumford reflects on transportation and people.
The average man hasn't very much choice left in the world, and therefore anything that gives him a slight amount of choice he regards as important for his well-being. And I think he still feels that the motor car gives him a little more freedom than he gets on the public transportation system. At the beginning, I think the automobile was not merely a symbol of liberation, but was a fact of liberation. It was a wonderful thing. If you owned a car and could go out over the bumpy dirt roads into the country and have advantages that you'd only dreamed about before. As a symbol of liberation, the automobile still remains. As a fact, it's become just the opposite of what the dream meant it to be.
What are the consequences? Where are we headed? Are we still seeing all the dimensions of where we're going if this kind of thing persists?
No, I don't think we've even begun to see the dimensions, because we're allowing our cities, for example, to be scattered over hundreds of square miles, and people are attempting to, without realizing what they're doing, to keep up a very complex and closely interrelated civilization with very primitive facilities. Our facilities are getting more and more primitive every day. The local facilities, while the large-scale facilities are becoming more technologically refined and more elegant. The jet plane will get our letters across the continent in 6 hours, but the post office department, using its motor trucks, takes 2 days to get them up from New York. People don't realize that we've gone backward incredibly during the last 50 years in all our local facilities. What we need is a balanced system of transportation, one which will take care of all our transportation needs, which goes beyond the use of the motor car alone, which goes beyond the use of the private vehicle alone. We need public transportation, we need private transportation. We need the pedestrian, we need the motor road, we need the railroad, we need the plane, we need the jet plane. But we mustn't think purely in terms of speed or purely in terms of popularity. We're treating a railroad system as though it were a disposable container. We've stopped drinking from it for the moment, and we're letting it go. But it's very likely that within another 10 years, we'll have to reinvent the railroad system in order to perform the functions that no other mode of transportation does. And when we do it, we'll do it at a colossal cost compared to the cost of keeping up the present system.
One city that is proposing, in effect, to reinvent the railroad is San Francisco. An ambitious and far-ranging plan costing over $1 billion and involving 5 counties goes before the voters next year. General Manager John Pierce of the Bay Area Rapid Transit District.
We in the San Francisco Bay Area are planning a regional system of rail rapid transit to relieve the growing problem of traffic congestion. Now, traffic congestion today is very difficult and very serious. Our principal concern is what is going to happen 10 or 20 or 30 years from today as our population doubles and the number of automobiles doubles or trebles. Now, in this rapid transit system that we are planning, the key link in the system is an underwater tube connecting with downtown Oakland. Now, this tube will pass under the existing Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge. It'll be approximately 4 miles in length. And through the use of this means, high-speed trains will be able to travel at top speeds of 80 miles an hour, connecting the 2 principal cities in this area, and this distance can be bridged in about 8 minutes. At the present time, with traffic congestion as it is, it takes approximately 45 minutes during congested hours or rush hours to bridge this same distance. When this line reaches Oakland, one branch will go north to Richmond and the University of California. Another line will go easterly into Contra Costa County, and a third line will extend south towards San Jose. Now, coming back to San Francisco, to the south will be a line going down the peninsula towards San Jose and eventually reaching San Jose. Then to the north, a line will go across the Golden Gate Bridge into Marin County. Now, that bridge is at the present time a vehicular bridge, but we propose to build a lower deck to accommodate these high-speed trains. I'd like to point out that part of these lines will be below ground in subways, part will be at grade, but grade separated, and then a part will be on graceful aerial structures, attractive to the eye and practically noiseless, without any interference from service traffic and without contributing to service congestion. So here you have a 5-county regional system of rail rapid transit capable of moving vast numbers of people economically, efficiently, and in competition with the automobile. And that is the secret of success, because if we do not plan a facility that will lure people out of their automobiles, they may continue to use those automobiles to the extent that they possibly can. So this is the obvious answer, and we are confident that in the next 10 years, when this system is built, we will have something that will indicate to metropolitan America an answer to traffic congestion which has arisen out of the popularity of the automobile.
While San Francisco's ambitious transit plan represents the possibilities of tomorrow, this is the reality of today. Not building, but dismantling. This is the burial of passenger service on the West Shore Division of the New York Central Railroad, a once flourishing commuter line serving New York City, which gradually surrendered over the years to the automobile. 4 former passenger conductors recall the circumstances of its departure.
The railroad was selling the commuters down the river. These commuters would ask their friends to ride this railroad, and their friends would say, what? To be delayed, to be held up by a freight train? The railroad did nothing in the past 15 years to encourage commuting travel. They did everything in their power to ruin commuting travel and abolish and take off trains in the past 15 years.
A lot of these passengers, I knew their families, I knew their wives, I knew their children when they went to work. Their children I used to take to school on trains. These men eventually, these school children eventually become commuters. And they complained, told me their problems, that they didn't get to work. But instead of meeting this competition, so-called competition, and try to make the railroad more efficient, they just ignored these people. I don't say they all quit at once, but you lose 5 or 6 this month and 10 next month, and the first you know, the train was gone. The people were gone.
The employees of the division feel that discontinuing the West Shore line was a mistake. And so, apparently, does the president of the railroad itself, Alfred Perlman.
And I've said right along that New York is committing suicide. There are 8 different authorities just to handle vehicular traffic in the metropolitan area, no one of whom reports to another. This is chaotic here. I agree with you that this is crazy, but as a man who must report to my board of directors and say, can I spend $100 million on new commuter cars when the state says I can't make a profit, this is a different thing. But all I'm saying is that from the standpoint of the city itself, where there isn't a coordinated plan on where to use rubber, where to use air, where to use steel, rail, in their best functions, I just think it's stupid.
It would seem that there is indeed something irrational about a situation in which a railroad discontinues a service because it's losing money, rips up the rails and sells the stations, while its president agrees that the abandoned line could perform a vital function for the people of a major city. And yet, this is not surprising, as a recent report made for the Senate Commerce Committee stated, and I quote, "The problems of the commuter railroad are not an isolated disease. They are symptoms of deep-seated deficiencies in urban transportation. Instead of having planned and coordinated systems for moving people by public and private means, we have a jumble of bits and pieces, all built without planning and without rational integration and coordination of services. The basic function of urban transportation systems is to move people. The basic function of cities is to provide a place for people to live and work with comfort and convenience. We have tended to lose sight of these fundamentals in the auto age and have concentrated on moving and storing vehicles to the exclusion of analyzing the functional transportation problem and taking appropriate action," unquote. We began this NBC white paper with railroads, and we find that we have ended with cities. Primarily, this is where the future of the passenger railroad seems to lie. The problem is to ensure that future by making some sense in the present. This is Chet Huntley.